First of all, I have to say that Group Santander is a global bank, is the biggest bank in Europe, if you consider the market value in the Eurozone, not in Europe, I have to say. And we have a strong presence in 10 countries, including the UK, the US, Germany, Spain, Portugal, and Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and Chile. So this is the footprint where we are working today. So our corporate headquarters is based in Madrid, in Boadilla, very close to the Politécnica University campus, Monte Gancedo. And we are doing some things in Boadilla, very small things. We are not doing anything that can be called the Boadilla Silicon Valley yet. But our reach is a global one. We are not a Spanish-centric company. The size of our Spanish business is only 10% of the total income in Santander. Okay, so having said that, I am going to talk about four very simple ideas, trying to illustrate the ideas and to leave some time to the discussion later on. The first idea is an introduction where I will try to stress the importance of data. Why paradigm in technology has shifted into data. Then I will shift and start talking about the importance of the open source approach in software development. So first data, and then software development, open source. Third, I will talk about what Grupo Santander is doing in the open source world. And fourth, I will try to make some simple conclusions based on the previous discussions. The first idea is, talking about data, is we are entering in a new era in computing history. If we consider computing history, we can consider this as a third era. First of all, long time ago, everything was about hardware. Hardware was at the center of the scenario. Hardware vendors were dominating everything. Software was something that you take as a consequence of having a hardware solution. Okay? So domination in this era was in the hands of the hardware manufacturers. Then we shift into an era that we can call the software era. This software era started with Microsoft Windows and the Oracle database dominance. And software started dominating the scenario. Hardware turns to be a commodity, and everything was about software. The competitive advantage was software. So having the proper software dominance was the competitive advantage. And now we are entering into a new era. I call this era the data era. Everything shifts into the importance of having data. So, having data. Data is the new asset. There is a new asset that is data. Having and treating and mastering data is the new paradigm. And then hardware is something that is needed, and software is something that is needed. in order to manage hardware, increasing amounts of hardware, the cloud paradigms are allowing us to use more hardware. It is very easy to use hardware today using the different cloud offerings. And the software turns to be a strategic asset into something that is a huge cost. And in order to fix the cost problem, an explosion on open source initiative has happened. So sharing software development is something that is needed just to concentrate all the efforts on data. This is for people like me that come from the software era, this is counterintuitive. So what about data? First of all, I want to illustrate the idea of there is a data explosion. We tend to manage data size using concepts like gigabyte and terabyte. And today we are thinking about several orders of magnitude. In reality, we are in the petabyte order of magnitude in a traditional business, but we have to think that we will have to cope in the future a brontobyte scenario, that is 10 elevado 27. This is a big, enormous amount of data. Think that petabyte is 1 petabyte is the data that the Large Hadron Collider is generated every second, or a zettabyte is what all the network traffic that will be generated in 2016, or jottabyte, that is 1024, is all the information that are stored in 250 trillion DVDs. So we need to change our mind. We will have to manage huge amounts of data, okay? And this huge amount of data are being collected and stored because there is a lot of value hidden in them, okay? And the amount of data is due to the fact that the behavior of the consumers has changed. People is allowing companies like Google to pick geolocalization data, places that the user has visited, shopping information, places where the user has made payments, people that you have interacted with, etc., etc., etc. So, an explosion of sources with structured and unstructured data. Unstructured data, for example, is your voice, your image that can be treated. The velocity, the pace where the data is generated, and the volume that you are using is allowing us to think in this big data scenario. Okay? And the barriers to manage this data are not important. First of all, there is a data availability problem. And this data availability problem, where you can face data protection issues, is overcome due to the customer behavior has fundamentally changed. And customer is eager to give their data if they can obtain something in return. And people is eager on sharing information in social networks, just to create new ways to relate with other people. Storage capacity is not anymore a constraint, because the way we are managing storage is not based on the traditional paradigms, and cloud paradigms and parallel horizontal storage models are allowing us to think that storing this big amount of data is feasible. And process capabilities and communication are not a constraint today, because Moore laws and the other laws are allowing us a final improving on capacity, process capacity and communication capacity. So this shifting nature of data and the lack of barriers are changing the business paradigm, the way we're doing business. So the way in the future people is going to do business has to take into account this big data scenario and has to take into account how to manage this big data in real time with a paradigm that is called machine learning. So managing this vast amount of data, creating value in different ways to the people, using sophisticated algorithms is creating a huge space of new business opportunities. So there is an enormous amount of opportunities that this new paradigm is opening up. But there is a constraint in order to achieve that. That is, creating software is an expensive task. So if you try to do all these new business models by yourself with a proprietary model trying to control all the software that is needed, the cost that you require is enormous. And that's the reason why open source is inevitable in this era of data, because the business model has very much shifted from processes to data. So this is just the introduction. Summarizing, data is important and open source is inevitable. So this is opening up a huge amount of opportunities for entrepreneurs. What about what is happening in the open source? So some ideas about open source. It is important to know that open source is a software that you can freely use, freely change, and freely share. But you cannot do business with that. Selling the licenses. So open source is something that you definitely need to share. So it's a change of paradigm. You cannot hit your open source development. You cannot license your open source development. Okay? The prediction is that by 2016, almost every global enterprise, the biggest 2,000 global enterprise, will use, for sure, open source solution for mission critical application. Mission critical application are the application where you run your business model. Okay, so it's not the application where you do other things. And there are plenty of drivers that are making everybody adopt this open source perspective. First of all, there is an incentive for the developers. Developers are winning, the good developers are winning because they can license their knowledge. The programmer, the individual programmer can license their knowledge in this model. The users are eliminating software acquisition costs. And the way this is organized is through different models, through different mechanisms where you can create communities to agree ways to develop this open source software. This is not to say that you don't require discipline in developing that. This is not a mess where everybody do whatever they want. You need to create in these communities a leadership, an organization, and a way to do things. And there is a proliferation of foundation and open source groups that are trying to create different leadership styles. These are 4 of the biggest open source communities in the world, where Santander is participating in 3 of the 4. The biggest one is Apache, where in Apache there is a huge activity around the big data paradigm. There is Eclipse, Linux, and Mozilla. These are the 4 biggest ones. But there is an explosion of software needs when you think about the business models that are not covered by these foundations. And there is a need to use the vast amount of software that is being created by these foundations. So it is not so simple to pick an Apache software and use it. So there is a shifting of the business model in the service and how to use this vast amount of software in new business models. Okay. For example, just to show an example, these are the sponsors of the Apache Foundation. You can find here Google, Microsoft, Facebook. Santander is a silver sponsor. It's a true product one, our subsidiary that we have. But you can find here Hewlett Packard, IBM, traditional companies, investing and helping this community to create that. So this is something that is being taken seriously, not only by the new players, the new internet giants, but by the traditional IT giants like IBM. So you find a foundation where sits together IBM and Google, this is something that has to be taken very seriously. Okay. This is a picture we're trying to show that if you consider all the stack of things that you can do in the software world, in the cloud or on-premise, you will find that open source is starting covering a huge spectrum of the total portfolio. You will see Microsoft trying to cover everything. IBM very much focused on on-premise and the infrastructure as a service paradigm. You will see Google going from the software as a service paradigm down in the chain, and you will see the open source trying to cover everything. So there is a huge activity in the open source community trying to do that. And this is a picture where we can see the level of maturity of the different open source initiatives, where you can find emergent open source initiatives, but you can find mature open source initiatives, of which one of the biggest initiatives is Linux. That is definitely a mature open source initiative. Okay, so having said that, I am running out of time. What about Group Santander and open source? What are we doing here? So why we are promoting open source technology? First of all, you find that your freedom of choice is completely increased. You find things in the open source community that you cannot buy in the market. So in a world where you need to innovate, freedom of choice is probably more important than cost. Okay? Second, you find that you can easily customize the solution. You can pick the solution, change the code, give back to the community, and obtain your customization easily than in a closed software solution. There is access to new knowledge that you didn't know in the previous paradigm. You start learning new ways to do things using open source. And last but not least, you reduce cost. You create efficiency. So this is not about cost reduction. This is a strategic choice. Okay. We have several open source initiatives run by ourselves. These are 6 initiatives. For example, we have improved tremendously our call center model using, for example, what we call Eureka, that is an open source platform adapted to ourselves. So each and every open source initiative has a business rationale. But at the same time, we are participating in some open source projects that are external. These are 3 of the projects that we are participating: Red Border, Icon, and we are giving back to the community, being members, active members of 3 communities. There's the Apache Foundation, the Eclipse, and the Linux Foundation. But this is not enough. This is not enough. We can do more. And this is where we find the opportunity to partner with universities, and where we have created, together with the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, what we call the Center for Open Middleware. It's a joint agreement. This is managed jointly with the Universidad Politécnica, with a common board, where we are defining projects with a specific objective that can be used in real world, and that can be the seed of future companies. So these are the 4 most interesting projects that we are doing. But the space, the opportunity of doing this type of initiative is enormous. So the more you create the ecosystem, the more the ecosystem expands. Our long-term objective is creating an open, public and private, combining both, ecosystem, where we combine the talent that you can find in our public universities with the power of doing practical things in a company like Santander with the fact that these different components that we are developing can be part of a new company that can be developed in an entrepreneur environment. Okay, I am running out of time, and so just to finish, what is the conclusion here? First idea is open source software is a critical enabler for the new era of data. Second idea, and this is very much concentrated to the European community, is Europe has to aggressively promote pan-European public-private partnerships. Just to create an open source ecosystem, or just to participate in the global open source ecosystem that will create new digital models. This idea is critical if we want to compete in the business arena with the American giants and some Chinese giants that are emerging, like Alibaba. So the lack of giants in Europe is very much based to the fact that Europe is not mastering these two ideas, data and open source. And the last idea is Banco Santander is willing to participate in these initiatives. Thank you very much. I am open for questions.
It might be a very, very stupid question because I'm not from ICT, but when I hear open source and I hear banks, my first question is this secure, all this? If I would have an account at Santander, which I don't, but would it then my money be safe there? It's perhaps very stupid, but...
I think that is a very important question, a very interesting question. In my presentation, I have a chart of that I have skipped. So let me go. What are the risks for the user of open source? So a bank, Google, Amazon, whoever uses open source, you have to manage open source in the same way you are managing your own software. Okay? So you have to completely decouple the development environment from the production environment, and you have to implement and to keep all the discipline that you have in your own software for the open source software. Okay? The only thing that you change is instead of doing you the code, you find the code done. The rest of the process has to be the same. Okay? You have to do another things. You have to do better software because you have to architect better the software so you can better use the components that you can find in the open source community, complementing this software with your own solutions. So software architecture is a discipline that requires a more focus in companies that are using open source. So if you go to Google or you go to Amazon, software architecture is key. So software architecture is telling you what are the components that you will pick from the software community and what are the components that you are going to do by yourselves. 2 weeks ago, I was visiting Facebook, and they told me that they definitely 90% of the software is open source, 10% of the software is not, and this is their competitive advantage. Okay, this is.
How many people do you have in the information systems department of Santander in Spain? How many people?
In Spain, we have a global operation, but in Spain we have about 5,000 people. Globally, we have 15,000 people.
Any questions? Yes. Yes, you mentioned about the machine learning. So how much they can learn? Can they proactively do something before we even know what we do next?
Okay, machine learning is an interesting software area where you can, using, let me say, a portfolio of algorithms, you can, using data, create conclusions. An example of that, of machine learning is, for example, the Watson initiative of IBM. What is doing machine learning? Is trying to assign a probability to, if you make an answer, a probability to the right question. Okay? What is the project? For example, the Watson project, one example. They try to participate in a television program that I don't remember the name, that is about making general questions and the participant has to answer. And Watson was another participant. At the beginning, Watson was losing. But the more you were participating in the program, the more your data increases. And the more your algorithms were refined, the machine ends up winning all. Jeopardy. It's Jeopardy. Jeopardy is the name. And what is this about? This is about effectively combining data and algorithms and assigning probability to the answers. And using time. You need time. The probabilities requires more data, that better answer, and refine the probability of the answers, and so on. This is not about that machine is gonna tell you the future. The future is unpredictable. This is a fact. So you can predict some steady state future. You cannot predict the future that is broken by emergent properties. Okay, so when there is an emergent phenomena, future is unpredictable. It's unpredictable. For example, nobody has predicted the mobile revolution. Yeah? So, because it is an emergent phenomena. But you can predict inside a steady system. Okay? But future as a whole is unpredictable. It's ontologically unpredictable. Okay? This is something that we need to understand because machine is not God. Summarizing.
Thank you very much for your speech. And,